I still remember that evening like it was painted in gold, the kind of memory that glows in your head right before it burns. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering between plates of roasted chicken and buttered vegetables. Ryan had even opened the expensive wine we'd been saving for our anniversary. And Chloe, my best friend since college, laughed beside him like she'd always belonged at our table. For a moment I thought, maybe life is finally calm. After months of Ryan working late and Chloe helping me feel less alone, it felt good to just exist in the same room. But beneath the laughter, something felt off. Ryan's eyes lingered on her a little too long when she spoke. Chloe's hand brushed his as she reached for the salt, and they both pulled away too quickly, pretending not to notice. I told myself I was imagining things. They'd always been friendly. I was the one who introduced them, after all. Still, a cold flutter twisted inside me, like intuition whispering a truth I didn't want to hear. They joked about an inside story I didn't know, and when I asked what it was, Ryan chuckled awkwardly and said, "Work stuff, babe. You wouldn't get it." The way Chloe's smile tightened told me he'd just lied, but I smiled anyway, pretending not to notice. That's what good wives do, right? Pretend to keep the peace. After dinner, Chloe insisted on helping with dishes. I stood beside her, washing plates under the warm water while she dried. The light from the kitchen made her skin glow. She was beautiful in a quiet, unthreatening way, or at least I used to think so. "You're lucky," she said, handing me a plate. "Ryan's one of the good ones." I laughed softly, but something in her tone wasn't admiration. It was ownership. My stomach tightened. When she left, she hugged Ryan first. That had never happened before, and when she finally turned to me, her perfume lingered like she wanted to be remembered. Ryan watched her walk down the driveway. I watched him watching her. Later, while he showered, I sat on the edge of our bed scrolling aimlessly through my phone, pretending not to care. But my reflection in the darkened screen looked like someone already halfway broken. I thought about the way he refilled her glass before mine, the way she called him Rye, like they shared some private nickname. I told myself to stop overthinking, to trust them. After all, Chloe was like family. Ryan came out of the bathroom, hair damp, towel around his waist. "You okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just tired." He kissed my forehead and said, "You worry too much." Then he turned away, humming softly as he checked his phone on the nightstand. A small buzz echoed when another message appeared. He locked it quickly, but not before I saw her name light up the screen. My chest tightened. It could have been innocent. Friends text, people talk, but something about the way his thumb lingered over the screen told me it wasn't casual. When he fell asleep, I lay there in the dark, listening to his steady breathing, fighting the war between trust and curiosity. The clock ticked past midnight before I finally gave in. I reached for his phone, hands trembling, telling myself it was just to ease my mind. The screen unlocked easily. He still used my birthday as his passcode. I scrolled through his messages, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might wake him. And then I saw it. A message from Chloe, time-stamped just before she'd left our house. "I miss you already. Same time tomorrow." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. My fingers went numb, the phone slipping slightly from my hand. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too sharp. My heartbeat drowned everything else. I looked at him. Peaceful, asleep, unaware that my entire world had just shifted. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and demand an explanation. But instead, I just sat there, frozen, the glow of the screen casting a pale light over the wreckage of the life I thought I had. And in that quiet, trembling moment, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. The life I believed was perfect had already been over long before that dinner ever began. Sleep didn't come that night. I kept staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between Ryan's breaths, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner, pretending I wasn't falling apart. His phone sat there on the nightstand, innocent and glowing, as if it hadn't just destroyed something sacred. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that one line again. "I miss you already. Same time tomorrow." burning behind my eyelids. By 3 a.m., the silence felt unbearable. My heart was thudding so hard it felt like guilt itself was pulsing through my veins. I told myself I wouldn't look again. But curiosity mixed with dread is stronger than willpower. I reached for his phone once more, careful not to wake him. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady as I unlocked the screen. The message thread with Chloe was still there, bright, alive, taunting me. I scrolled up, past the miss you and the little heart emojis, until the truth started unfolding in real time. Weeks, maybe months. Dozens of messages, sometimes long and emotional, sometimes short and charged with a familiarity that didn't belong between friends. You looked so beautiful today. Wish we could just be together without sneaking around. She suspects something. My breath caught at that one. She. That was me. I wasn't just betrayed. I'd been discussed like an obstacle. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper. I remembered the countless times Chloe had told me, "You're lucky, Emma. Ryan really loves you." I remembered her being the one who helped me pick out my wedding dress, her eyes misty as she zipped me in. She'd said, "He's going to cry when he sees you walking down that aisle." I used to think she meant it from the heart. Now I wondered if she'd been imagining herself in that dress. I scrolled more. There were photos, selfies of them at places I didn't recognize. A coffee shop I'd never been to, a movie theater we used to go to together. My hands went cold. One message from him read, "I told her I'm working late tomorrow. Can't wait to see you." My mind flashed to the lonely nights I'd spent watching TV, waiting for him to come home, texting Chloe for company. She was probably with him those nights, smiling at my messages while lying beside him. I felt my chest tighten until it hurt to breathe. Betrayal from one person is a wound. Betrayal from two is a hollowing. It wasn't just my husband I'd lost. It was my best friend, my confidant, the person I'd trusted with every doubt, every tear, every secret. The memories came flooding back. Our sleepovers, college parties, how she'd cried when I got engaged because she said she was so happy for me. Every one of those moments now felt rewritten, their meanings replaced with quiet deceit. The anger built slowly, like heat rising through water. I got up, pacing the room, clutching his phone in my hand. I wanted to throw it, smash it, wake him up and demand why. But then, somewhere deep down, a cold calmness started to take over. I didn't want excuses. I wanted truth, unfiltered, undeniable, and face-to-face. So I texted Chloe. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." She replied almost instantly, as if she'd been awake, expecting it. "Sure. Coffee tomorrow?" I stared at the message, my fingers trembling as I typed back, "No. Now." When I arrived at her place 20 minutes later, she opened the door wearing one of Ryan's hoodies. That detail nearly broke me. She didn't even try to hide it. Her eyes were unapologetic, smug almost. "You couldn't sleep, huh?" she said softly, stepping aside so I could enter. My voice cracked. "How long, Chloe?" She shrugged, leaning against the counter like this was some casual catch-up. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," I said, the words barely audible. "You were my best friend. I trusted you. I told you everything about us, about my fears and you." She cut me off with a quiet laugh. "You always acted like you had the perfect life, Emma. The perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect everything. Guess it's my turn now." For a moment, everything went silent. The weight of her words settled like ash, suffocating, irreversible. The news spread faster than I could process it. 1 minute, it was just between us, the betrayal, the confrontation. And the next, it had become gossip, passed through whispered conversations and half-hidden phone screens. Our friends, our neighbors, even Ryan's coworkers somehow knew. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. Pitying eyes, judging eyes, the kind that pretended to care, but secretly feasted on the spectacle of someone else's downfall. When our mutual friend Lily invited me to her birthday party a week later, I almost didn't go. I told myself I needed to show I wasn't broken, that I was still me. I spent an hour getting ready, staring at my reflection, trying to recognize the woman in the mirror. I wore a dress Ryan once said made me look elegant. Maybe I wanted him to remember that. Maybe I just wanted someone to. The party was already alive when I arrived. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. But the moment I walked in, the sound seemed to dull. Conversations paused. A few people smiled too tightly. Others turned away. I forced a smile and greeted Lily, who hugged me with that hesitant sympathy people give when they don't know which version of your pain they're allowed to acknowledge. "You look good," she said softly. Translation: "You look like you're trying." I hadn't been there 5 minutes when I heard it. The laughter. Familiar, unmistakable. I turned and there they were. Ryan and Chloe. Together. He had his arm around her like it had always belonged there. She wore the necklace I'd once given her for her birthday, the one she'd called her lucky charm. I felt my throat tighten. People watched, some whispering, some pretending not to see. I stood frozen as they approached, Ryan's hand still casually resting on her lower back. "Emma," he said, his tone annoyingly calm. "Didn't expect to see you here?" Chloe smiled, that same tilted smile she used when she was trying to seem innocent. "You look great," she said, as if the knife in her words weren't obvious. I wanted to scream, to slap the smugness off both their faces. Instead, I managed a brittle smile. "You two seem comfortable." Ryan's jaw twitched, and Chloe squeezed his arm as if to remind him she'd already won. "We're just trying to move on," she said sweetly. The words hit harder than I expected. Move on. As if our marriage, our friendship, my entire life, were nothing more than a chapter they decided to close. I stayed for another half hour, mostly standing near the drinks table, trying to disappear. Every laugh, every glance felt loaded, every whisper sounded like my name. Poor Emma. Can you believe it? She didn't see it coming. My ears burned, and my chest ached with humiliation. These were people I'd shared dinners with, who'd celebrated my wedding, who'd held my baby niece at my house. Now, I was nothing but gossip fuel. At one point, I caught my reflection in the patio glass, eyes red, lipstick fading, shoulders slightly hunched. I didn't look elegant anymore. I looked like a ghost haunting a life that wasn't mine. I slipped out quietly, not that anyone noticed. Outside, the cool night air felt cruelly clean. I walked to my car, parked under a flickering streetlight, and sat there in the dark. My hands gripped the steering wheel as tears spilled down my cheeks faster than I could stop them. I pressed my forehead against the leather and whispered, "I gave them everything." The words felt hollow, like they'd already been said 1,000 times inside me. I thought about all the sacrifices, working overtime so Ryan could pursue his business idea, loaning Chloe money when she said she was broke, planning parties for them both, believing their happiness was somehow tied to mine, and in return they'd taken everything that mattered and paraded it like a prize. The sobs came in waves, raw and ugly, until I couldn't cry anymore. My face was wet, my throat sore, and my body numb. Eventually, I started the engine, driving home through empty streets that looked unfamiliar under the cold glow of streetlights. The house, our house, felt foreign when I pulled into the driveway. His car wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. I sat there, engine still running, staring at the front door, wondering what I was even holding on to. That's when I noticed the white envelope wedged into the doorframe. My name, written in Ryan's neat handwriting. For a moment, I thought maybe it was an apology. Maybe guilt had finally cracked through whatever shell he'd built around himself. But when I tore it open, the words inside made my knees give out. Eviction notice. Effective immediately. Property listed for sale. Ryan Miller, co-owner. At the bottom, a short note in his handwriting. It's time for both of us to start fresh. I stood there on the porch, the letter fluttering in my shaking hands as the last remnants of my old life crumbled around me. It had been almost a month since I'd last seen Mrs. Alden. She'd stopped coming to the cafe after one rainy Tuesday. And though I told myself she was just unwell or traveling, something deep in my chest knew that wasn't true. Still, I kept her favorite table polished, the corner one by the window, just in case she walked in again with her cardigan buttoned wrong and that shy, knowing smile. Life had settled into a kind of quiet monotony. I was renting a small apartment above a laundromat. Noisy pipes, flickering light in the hallway, the faint hum of washing machines below. My days blurred together between cafe shifts and silent evenings. But I was surviving, piece by piece. Sometimes that felt like victory enough. Then one morning I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, a man in a gray suit stood there holding a clipboard and a thick white envelope. "Emma Miller?" he asked formally. My heart stuttered. Those words always triggered dread now. I nodded and he handed me the envelope. Certified delivery from Thompson and Rowe Law. He made me sign, then left without another word. For a long minute, I just stared at the envelope, my mind racing. Lawyers. My stomach twisted. Was this something from Ryan? A debt? Some legal notice tied to the house? My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a folded letter, printed on heavy cream paper, embossed with the law firm's name. My eyes went first to the handwritten signature at the bottom. Margaret Alden. My breath caught. Mrs. Alden. I sank onto the edge of my bed, heart pounding. The letter began simply. "Dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've gone on to meet my husband, finally, after so many years. I've thought a great deal about you since the day you refused my tip and told me kindness shouldn't have a price. That stayed with me. You reminded me of someone I once failed to protect, and I promised myself I would not make that mistake again." I blinked hard as the words blurred through tears. My hands shook as I read on. "I have left instructions for my attorney to transfer $70,000 to you. It is not charity, my dear, but recognition. You've endured betrayal with grace and worked with dignity when you had every reason to give up. I want you to start the life you deserve, not the one others decided for you." The letter ended with a postscript. "The world was cruel to me once too. Take this chance and make it kind again." When I finished reading, I just sat there, frozen. Then I laughed. Or maybe it was a sob that turned into laughter. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling my heart hammer against it. Mrs. Alden, the quiet widow who always ordered chamomile tea and left generous tips for the waitstaff, had seen me. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Thank you." It felt like the universe had finally sent a reply to all the cries I'd poured into the dark. For the first time in months, I felt seen, not pitied, not gossiped about, not ignored, just quietly understood. I thought about all the moments I'd shared with her, helping her carry groceries when her hands trembled, listening as she told me about her husband's long illness, laughing softly when she teased that I made the world less sharp around the edges. I hadn't realized how much those small conversations had meant to both of us. $70,000. It wasn't just money, and it was possibility. It was freedom. It was a door opening after months of staring at walls. That night I made tea and read her letter again and again. I thought about everything I could do now. Pay off my debts, maybe start my own little business, maybe even move somewhere that didn't echo with memories of Ryan and Chloe. I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes before another storm, but the steady, glowing kind that comes when you finally realize the worst might be behind you. The next morning, sunlight poured through the thin curtains, and for once, it didn't feel harsh. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, rereading Mrs. Alden's letter, tracing the ink of her signature with my fingertip. I whispered, "I'll make you proud." Just then, my phone buzzed against the table. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in weeks, Ryan. My chest tightened. I stared at it, frozen as it rang again. Then his voice came through the speaker, tentative, almost gentle. "Emma, can we talk?" When Ryan called, I didn't answer right away. I stared at his name flashing on my screen, the memory of his voice still lodged somewhere deep in my chest, like a shard I'd stopped touching but never removed. After the third missed call, he sent a text. "Please, Emma, just dinner. I owe you that much. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see if he looked as small in real life as he did in my memories. Or maybe I wanted closure, the kind that doesn't come through silence." We met at a small restaurant downtown, one we used to visit on anniversaries when life still felt like a promise. The host recognized me but hesitated when she saw Ryan behind me. I gave her a polite smile, pretending I didn't notice. We were seated near the window, under soft amber lighting that made everything look too gentle for what it really was. He looked older. Just a few months had passed, but the sharpness in his jawline had softened. His eyes carried shadows. He smiled nervously and said, "You look good." I thanked him, forcing a neutral tone. He reached for the wine list like old times, but his hands fidgeted too much for it to seem casual. We made small talk first, surface-level words floating over a sea of things unspoken. "How's work? How's your family? Have you talked to Chloe?" I asked that last one out of habit, then immediately regretted it. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "We're not together anymore," he said. She left. Took what little I had left and moved to California. Said she needed a fresh start. I didn't respond. I just nodded, eyes calm. But inside, a part of me felt the strange pulse of poetic justice. He went on, explaining how his business had fallen apart, how the house never sold for what he'd hoped, how he'd been humbled. The word rolled off his tongue like a plea for sympathy. I stirred my drink slowly, watching him search my face for a reaction. "I really messed things up," he said, leaning forward. "With you. With everything. I thought I was chasing something better, but I just ended up losing." "Well, you?" I studied him quietly. There was a time when those words would have cracked me open. Tonight they barely left a mark. I'd spent too many nights rebuilding myself from the pieces he'd scattered. Now, his regret was just another echo of something long dead. Still, I played along, offering small smiles, letting him believe I was simply doing okay. He asked about my job, and I told him I was working extra hours at the cafe. That part was true. What I didn't mention was the inheritance sitting safely in a savings account. The quiet fortune that had bought me peace and options. I had no interest in sharing that part of my life with him. He nodded thoughtfully. "You always were the hardworking one," he said, with a touch of nostalgia. Then his tone softened, more careful. "But things can change, you know. Maybe we could, I don't know, start fresh? Together." The words hit me like cold water. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. His eyes were fixed on me, searching, hopeful in a way that made my stomach twist. "You're serious?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He smiled, almost sheepishly. "I just keep thinking about us. We had something real, Emma. I was stupid, but maybe we could find our way back. You still look amazing, by the way." I sat there, stunned, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. He said it so smoothly, as if the past few months were just a bad dream, as if he hadn't gutted my world and handed it to someone else. For a moment, I almost pitied him, the desperation beneath the charm, the flicker of greed disguised as remorse. But then I remembered that night in the car, the whispers, the eviction notice. He smiled again, confident this was his second chance. "Maybe we could start over," he said softly. I felt the corner of my mouth lift, not in agreement, but in quiet disbelief. He had no idea what kind of woman I'd become since he left. After that dinner, I went home and sat in silence for a long time. Ryan's words kept echoing in my head. Maybe we could start over. Once upon a time, that would have been the lifeline I begged for. But now, it just sounded hollow, like a song I'd outgrown. That night, I opened my laptop, stared at the empty desktop screen, and thought about who I'd been before all of this. Before betrayal. Before bitterness. Before the world taught me to measure my worth by who stayed, instead of what I created. I remembered my old dream, to design spaces that made people feel seen. I'd studied design once, long before marriage and practical choices buried it under bills and compromises. Maybe Mrs. Alden's gift wasn't just money. Maybe it was a nudge toward the life I'd left behind. So I began. The first thing I did was sketch. I dug out my old drawing tablet from the closet, wiped the dust off, and started designing again. Logos, room layouts, digital mock-ups, anything that made me feel alive. The work was clumsy at first, my skills rusty, my creativity hesitant, but every line, every curve was a small rebellion against the woman I used to be. I used $1,500 of the inheritance to enroll in an online business course, and another $800 for software and domain fees. I called the brand Renew Studio. It felt right. Something born from ruin. Something quietly defiant. The early weeks were brutal. I worked long shifts at the cafe, then came home to design through the night, my eyes stinging from the screen. I'd post my work online and get maybe 2 likes. One from a stranger, one from an account that looked suspiciously like a bot. But I kept going. I refused to measure success by applause anymore. Some nights, doubt crept in like a whisper. "Who are you kidding, Emma? You're a barista with a broken heart." But I'd remember Mrs. Alden's letter. "Start the life you deserve." Those words became a mantra. So I poured myself into learning. I watched tutorials, read design blogs, followed trends. I failed often. My first client hated my color palette. The second ghosted me after revisions. I cried once, staring at my rejection emails, wondering if Ryan was right when he said I was too sentimental to succeed. But something inside me had changed. I didn't crumble this time. I adjusted, improved, and slowly, the world began to notice. A small cafe in another town hired me to redesign their space remotely. Then a boutique owner asked for branding help after seeing my portfolio on social media. Each project brought a few more followers, a few more clients, and a few more dollars. I started to smile again. Not because someone validated me, but because I was finally validating myself. I worked harder than I ever had before. My apartment turned into a studio. Walls covered in sketches, color swatches, and sticky notes. I'd brew tea late into the night, the hum of my laptop keeping me company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every design I finished, every payment that cleared, felt like a piece of my life falling back into place. Months passed, and my small brand began to take shape. I started sharing my story in fragments online, not the gossip version people whispered about, but the truth. A woman rebuilding herself through art. The response was overwhelming. Messages from strangers poured in. Women who'd been cheated on, left behind, underestimated. They said my journey gave them hope. One comment stayed with me. "They took your heart, but you rebuilt it into a brand." That line became my mission statement. I had built something from ashes. Not revenge, not really. This was rebirth. Power reclaimed, 1 pixel, 1 plan, 1 design at a time. I didn't need Ryan to see it, but I knew he would. People like him always come back around when they realize they can't replace what they broke. One evening, after wrapping up a client call, I checked my inbox. There was a message from an unfamiliar name. Rebecca Lang, Creative Director, L'Atelier Luxe Interiors. I frowned, thinking it was spam, but curiosity made me click. Her email was short but breathtaking. "Dear Emma, I've been following Renew Studio's work online. Your designs have a signature blend of warmth and precision that's rare in this industry. I'd love to discuss a possible collaboration. Our firm is looking to bring on independent talent for a new luxury interiors campaign." My breath caught. L'Atelier Luxe. I'd read about them in magazines, seen their work in penthouses and hotels. This wasn't just validation. This was a door into a world I'd only dreamed of entering. I read the email again, then again. The room felt brighter, like the universe had been waiting for this exact moment to whisper, "See, this is who you were meant to be." I closed my laptop slowly, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. The woman staring back wasn't broken anymore. She was becoming something entirely new. The night of the gala felt like something out of a dream I wasn't supposed to have. The kind of dream you wake from because it's too beautiful to be yours. But there I was, standing in front of a full-length mirror in the hotel dressing room, smoothing the silk folds of a deep emerald gown that shimmered every time I moved. My hair, pinned loosely at the nape of my neck, framed the calmest version of myself I'd ever seen. Not the woman who begged for love, or cried in parked cars, or doubted every breath she took. This was someone else entirely, someone I had rebuilt, thread by thread. "Ready, Ms. Hayes?" the event coordinator asked softly. I smiled, the sound of my name still foreign in this new world. Ready. The ballroom was alive with golden light and murmured elegance. Chandeliers gleaming like constellations, soft jazz humming through the air, and the scent of roses layered with expensive perfume. The event, hosted by L'Atelier Luxe Interiors, was the pinnacle of the design world, a place where visionaries mingled, champagne flowed freely, and reputations were quietly made or broken. And tonight, Renew and Rise, my rebranded studio, had been invited as a featured partner. I found my display in the exhibit area, a minimalist booth glowing with warm, amber light displaying samples of my interior concepts. A plaque read, Renew and Rise, founded by Emma Hayes, a story of transformation through design. Transformation. The word felt poetic and raw. As I straightened a framed concept board, a familiar laugh drifted across the room, a sound I once knew too well. My stomach tightened. I turned, and there they were, Ryan and Chloe. Chloe's blonde hair gleamed under the chandeliers, styled in effortless waves. She wore a fitted white gown, her arm looped around Ryan's like they were still the perfect couple they pretended to be. She was chatting animatedly with a photographer, her influencer badge catching the light. Ryan looked older, the confidence dulled from his eyes, his once-tailored suit hanging a bit loose. For a heartbeat, the world tilted back to that old ache, the betrayal, the humiliation, the nights I questioned if I'd ever be enough. But it passed, replaced by something quieter. Not rage, not triumph, just peace. I turned back to my booth. I didn't need to hide, Emma. The voice was tentative. I turned again, and there was Ryan, alone this time. He looked uncertain, almost hesitant. A stark contrast to the man who once stood tall with arrogance. Ryan, I said simply. He smiled, that same practiced, apologetic smile I used to fall for. Wow, look at you. I saw your name in the program and had to see for myself. You've really changed. I have. I heard about your company, he continued, glancing around the booth. Renew and Rise, that's you? It is, he whistled softly. You always were creative. I just never thought that I could build something without you. I finished, not cruelly, just calmly. He flinched, then chuckled awkwardly. I deserved that. Chloe joined him a moment later, her eyes sweeping over me, assessing, calculating. Emma, she said, her tone bright but tight. This is quite the... Come back. Thank you, I said. It's been a lot of work. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We're working with Aurelia Interiors now. Influencer campaign. Maybe we'll see each other more often. Maybe, I said, though we both knew she didn't mean it. Before either could say more, a staff member approached me. Ms. Hayes, they're about to start the presentations. You're seated at the front, VIP section. Chloe's smile flickered. Ryan's jaw tightened. I nodded graciously and followed the attendant, leaving them behind in a swirl of whispers and flashbulbs. Inside the main hall, hundreds of guests filled the candlelit tables. The air pulsed with expectation. I found my seat beside Rebecca Lang, the creative director who had given me my first real chance. She leaned over with a warm smile. You look radiant. Are you ready for your big moment? I blinked. Big moment? She just smiled knowingly. You'll see. The lights dimmed. The host took the stage, microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Vision and Design Gala. Tonight we honor innovation, not just in aesthetics, but in resilience. Because behind every creation, there's a story. My pulse quickened. I sipped water to hide the tremor in my hands. The host continued. Our next introduction is someone whose journey embodies that spirit. A designer who turned personal heartbreak into breathtaking artistry, who reminds us that creation is often born from chaos. I froze. A spotlight cut across the room and stopped on me. The host's voice rose, clear and proud. Please welcome our newest partner, a visionary designer who turned pain into art. Emma Hayes, founder of Renew and Rise. Applause thundered through the hall. Cameras flashed. My breath caught in my throat as I rose to my feet, light washing over me. For a moment, I saw Ryan and Chloe standing at the back of the room, their expressions unreadable. But it didn't matter. Because this time, I wasn't the woman they broke. I was the woman who rose. The applause still echoed in my chest long after I stepped off the stage. For a few suspended seconds, I stood there under the soft hum of music and clinking glasses, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not vindication exactly, but wholeness. The kind that comes only when you've survived the fire and finally realize the smoke no longer chokes you. I smiled at the audience, thanking them as I was guided to the podium. My speech was short, just 5 minutes, but every word carried the weight of years. I used to believe that when people hurt you, you had to fight back, I began, my voice steady through the microphone. That revenge meant proving them wrong, but sometimes the best revenge is proving yourself right. A hush fell over the crowd. I let it linger, then continued. There was a time when I lost everything I thought I needed, my home, my marriage, my confidence. But losing those things taught me something deeper. It taught me that you can start over, no matter how far you've fallen, as long as you choose dignity over bitterness. The words came from a place that still ached, but no longer bled. To anyone sitting here tonight who's been betrayed, overlooked, or dismissed, I want you to remember this. You are not defined by what was taken from you, but by what you build afterward. I smiled gently, my gaze sweeping over the faces before me, and that's when I saw them, Ryan and Chloe, standing near the back. Their eyes were wide, the kind of silence that doesn't need words. Chloe's jaw was set, Ryan's expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, I saw the life I had once begged to keep, and I realized I no longer wanted it. When I stepped off the stage, the applause roared again. People came forward. Investors, designers, strangers with kind eyes. They shook my hand, praised my words, said I'd inspired them, and all I could think was how strange it felt to finally be seen for the right reasons. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. Ryan was weaving through the crowd toward me. My pulse didn't quicken this time. I didn't brace myself. I simply turned, calm and still. "Emma," he said softly when he reached me. His tone was rehearsed, a fragile mixture of humility and regret. That was powerful. "Thank you," I replied, voice even. He hesitated, his hand brushing through his hair the way he always did when nervous. "You've really turned things around. I'm proud of you." "I mean it. Are you?" I asked. There was no accusation, no heat. Just quiet curiosity, he nodded, eyes flickering downward. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I tilted my head, watching him. "You didn't lose me, Ryan. You gave me away. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of the room, of the murmuring crowd, pressed between us. For a second, I saw the man I used to love, or maybe the man I imagined him to be, and I felt something unexpected. Compassion. Not forgiveness, but closure. Behind him, Chloe approached, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her expression was tight, brittle. "So this is what you've been up to," she said coolly. "Playing the saint while everyone claps for you?" I met her gaze. "No," I said simply. "Just telling the truth," she scoffed. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said, my smile faint but real. "I think I'm better than who I used to be." The words landed with quiet precision. Chloe's face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening as she turned sharply and stormed off, the sound of her heels echoing through the hall like punctuation marks to an ending I hadn't needed to write. Ryan watched her go, then looked back at me, lost between regret and confusion. "I don't know what happened to us," he murmured. I held his gaze. "We became who we really were. You just didn't like the reflection." He swallowed hard, eyes glimmering with something between apology and envy. "You really did find what you deserved," he said quietly. I smiled, soft but sure. "I guess we both did." For a moment he didn't move. Then he nodded faintly and turned away, disappearing into the crowd, swallowed by the golden light and fading chatter. As the night drew on, I stood near the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The air outside was cool, crisp, and alive with possibility. Below me, The lights shimmered like 1,000 untold futures. My phone buzzed, a notification from one of the trade magazines covering the event. The headline flashed, "Renew and Rise's Emma Hayes dominates the design gala, a new era of empowerment." I exhaled, a small laugh breaking through the quiet. For years, I'd chased validation from people who couldn't see my worth. Now I understood that worth doesn't need applause. It needs peace. Somewhere in that same city, Chloe was unraveling under her own pride. Ryan's company, I later heard whispered between glasses of champagne, was collapsing, one bad deal after another. Maybe karma wasn't loud. Maybe it was just patient. And standing there under the soft glow of the city, I realized my revenge had never needed words, or rage, or public spectacle. It was silent. It was graceful, and it was mine. The knock on my office door came just as I was reviewing a new partnership proposal. My assistant's voice followed, hesitant, unsure. "Emma, there's someone here asking for you. Says it's urgent." When Ryan stepped in, I almost didn't recognize him. The sharpness he once carried, the expensive watch, the confident grin, had dulled into something worn and uncertain. His suit hung loosely, creased at the elbows, as if success had finally stopped tailoring itself around him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He glanced around my office, taking in the clean lines, the framed design awards, the sunlight spilling across my desk. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, every inch earned. "Nice place," he said finally, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks," I replied evenly. "What brings you here?" He shifted, rubbing the back of his neck. I wouldn't be here if I had another choice." His voice cracked slightly. "Things have been rough lately. The company, well, you've probably heard." I nodded once. "I've heard a few things." He gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah, Chloe. She's gone. Took whatever was left of the savings and moved to LA. Apparently, influencers have better weather there." His attempt at humor wilted in the silence that followed. "Anyway, I'm trying to keep the business afloat, but the investors pulled out. I'm out of options." I folded my hands. "So what do you need from me, Ryan?" His eyes darted to the floor. "I just thought, maybe you could help. You've done so well for yourself. I'm proud of you, really. And I figured, for old time's sake, maybe you'd consider investing. It doesn't have to be much, just enough to get things going again." For a second, I simply watched him. The man who had once taken my stability, my trust, and tossed it aside like spare change, was now standing in front of me, asking for a handout. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange kind of distance, like looking through a glass window at a life I'd already left behind. "You know," I said quietly, "when you told me you wanted to start fresh, I never imagined this is what you meant." He looked up, cheeks reddening. "Emma, come on. I made mistakes. We both did." I shook my head gently. "No, Ryan, I made sacrifices. You made choices." He opened his mouth, but I continued before he could speak. "When you sold the house, you didn't just sell walls and furniture. You sold the trust between us. You made sure I had nowhere to go. And now you're here because you've run out of places to stand." His jaw tightened. "You don't have to make this harder than it already is." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once called me weak was now asking for strength he no longer had. "I'm not trying to make it harder," I said softly. "I'm just making sure we both remember how we got here." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Ryan's eyes flicked toward the framed photo on my desk, me standing beside the Renew and Rise logo at our launch event. The pride in that image seemed to unsettle him. "You've really changed," he said finally. I smiled faintly. "That was the point." He sighed, defeated. "So that's it then? You're just going to watch me drown?" The question lingered in the air, heavy and self-pitying. I opened the top drawer of my desk, pulled out my checkbook, and began to write. His eyes followed every stroke of the pen, a flicker of hope sparking across his face. When I finished, I tore the check carefully and slid it across the desk toward him. He reached for it eagerly, his hands trembling. But as his eyes met the number, confusion clouded his face. $70,000? He said slowly. Why that amount? I met his gaze evenly. It's what someone once gave me when I had nothing left. I used it to build something real. He blinked, uncertain. You're giving me $70,000? Yes, I said. But it's not a gift. I pushed the check closer. Pay me back when you remember who you were supposed to be. The words hung in the air like quiet thunder. Ryan stared at me, speechless. His lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, not pathetic, just stripped of every illusion that used to armor him. He folded the check slowly, his movements mechanical. You're serious, he whispered, completely. He nodded once, swallowing hard. I don't know what to say. Try thank you, I replied softly. It's something you never really learned. He gave a faint, bitter smile, the kind that comes when a man realizes the chapter is closed and he's no longer the author. Goodbye, Emma, he said quietly. Goodbye, Ryan. When he left, the door closed with a soft click that sounded like closure. I looked down at my desk, at the empty space where the check had been, and felt an odd peace wash over me. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was release. Outside my window, the city pulsed with light and movement. Somewhere out there, Ryan would have to face himself, and for the first time I didn't need to see it happen to feel satisfied. It's strange how numbers can hold stories. $70,000, the same amount that once saved me, now sat like a quiet punctuation mark at the end of a long, chaotic sentence. I hadn't thought much about the check since that day. Whether Ryan ever cashed it or tore it apart didn't matter. The act of writing it had closed something in me that no apology ever could. I used to think closure came with explanations or tears, or a final confrontation. But standing where I am now, I know it's quieter than that. Closure is an exhale. The moment you stop rehearsing the pain and start living beyond it. The office feels different these days. Lighter. My team laughs in the next room, the sound spilling through the open door like sunlight. The walls, once bare, are now covered with sketches, concept boards, and new product mock-ups. Renew and Rise has grown faster than I ever dreamed. We're launching internationally next quarter, something that would have terrified the old me. Now, it just feels right. Like stepping into the life I was always meant to live. Sometimes I look at the framed photo of Mrs. Alden that I keep near my desk. It was taken on her last cafe visit, her eyes half hidden behind those oversized glasses, her smile subtle but knowing. I wonder if she had seen the same broken girl I saw in the mirror back then, or if she had seen something else entirely. Maybe she saw what I could become. When the first big magazine feature came out, I found myself whispering, "We did it, Mrs. Alden." Not I. We, because none of this would have happened without that single act of compassion. Her kindness didn't just give me money. It gave me proof that good still existed, that life could still surprise you with grace. I think about that a lot now, how one person's generosity can echo through another's rebirth. It made me realize something profound. Revenge fades, but gratitude endures. I don't replay the betrayal anymore. I don't see Ryan and Chloe when I close my eyes. Instead, I see myself, hands steady, heart quiet, creating something beautiful from what was broken. The ache that once lived in me has turned into a kind of calm. Even my reflection looks different now. My smile isn't forced. My eyes no longer dart toward old ghosts. Peace has a way of softening everything, even memory. Sometimes, on late nights when the city outside my window hums with distant traffic, I let my thoughts drift. I imagine Ryan somewhere trying to rebuild. Maybe he'll remember who he was supposed to be. Maybe he won't. Either way, it's not my story to follow anymore. I've learned that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means owning it without letting it own you. Every painful chapter is just proof that you kept turning the page. Last Friday, we held our first Renew and Rise charity event. Scholarships for women rebuilding after divorce or financial loss. I stood on the stage, looking out at a room full of faces lit with hope. When I announced the fund, the applause was thunderous. But what filled me wasn't pride. It was something simpler. Completion. After the guests left and the lights dimmed, I stayed behind for a while, tracing my fingers along the edge of the stage. The air smelled faintly of roses and champagne. For the first time, I didn't need to imagine what peace looked like. I was living in it. That's when my assistant appeared, holding a small, cream-colored envelope. "This just arrived by courier," she said. "It's from a law office, the same one that handled Mrs. Alden's estate." My chest tightened with quiet curiosity. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, handwritten in neat, looping script. "Dear Ms. Hayes, we recently finalized the remaining estate documents for Mrs. Alden. Among them, we discovered a note she had written but never mailed. She asked that we deliver it to you at an appropriate time, when you seem to have found your footing again. She'd be proud of you, that was all." 4 words that undid me more than any grand gesture could. I sat down, holding the letter against my chest, and for a moment, tears blurred the world into soft light. Mrs. Alden had seen something in me before I saw it in myself. And somehow, even after she was gone, she still knew exactly when I needed her voice. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet fill the room. The city lights twinkled outside, my team's laughter still faint down the hall. Life, for the first time, didn't feel like something I was surviving. It felt like something I was finally living. The circle was complete. The ocean had always been my dream. Not the kind of dream that screamed luxury or status, but peace. The kind where mornings smelled like salt and possibility, and every wave reminded you how small, yet infinite, life could feel. When I finally stood on the balcony of my new home, the horizon stretched endlessly before me. Pale light danced on the surface of the water, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I was simply here. The house wasn't enormous, but it was mine. White walls, soft oak floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that invited the sea inside. Every corner carried a quiet elegance, calm, grounded, unpretentious. There were no ghosts here, no memories that burned, only the sound of the waves, steady and forgiving. Renew and Rise had expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. We'd opened offices in London and Sydney, with more on the way. Investors who once ignored my emails now asked for meetings. I should have felt triumphant, and in a way, I did. But it wasn't the success itself that filled me. It was the serenity that came with knowing I'd built it from truth. From pain, yes, but also from grace. Sometimes, I caught myself thinking about the woman who once sat crying in her car outside her old house, clutching an eviction notice. I wanted to reach back through time, hold her hand, and tell her she'd make it. That one day she'd wake up to sunlight, not sorrow. Ryan never did pay back the check, at least not in dollars. But I've come to realize he already repaid me in lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and how power shifts when you stop begging for love and start giving it to yourself. On quiet evenings, I'd walk barefoot along the shore after work. The air was sharp with sea breeze, the sky streaked in gold. I'd think about Mrs. Alden, her kindness, her letter, the chain reaction she never got to witness. I hoped somehow she knew the difference she made. One afternoon, after arranging books and sketches in my new office, I unpacked a small box marked personal. Inside was the photograph of Mrs. Alden, her faint smile frozen in that familiar softness. I held it for a long moment, remembering the cafe, her words, "You remind me of someone I once failed to protect." I placed the photo gently on the highest shelf, where the light from the window touched it perfectly. The glass reflected both of us, her and me, 2 women connected by resilience and quiet defiance. I took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the sea through the glass. My reflection smiled back, no longer a stranger. In my final voiceover, if this were the story I used to dream of telling, I'd say, "I thought revenge would heal me. But what I found was better, freedom." And as the camera of memory panned wide, the waves kept moving, endless and calm. The woman I had become stood by the window, no longer waiting for justice, no longer mourning what was lost, only living what had finally been found.